If you've watched my first devlog, you've seen someone confident in their project. Well, turns out a lot can change in just a few weeks and then change again and always back and forth. Let me tell you a little story about trying to find a story and a vision and overall just a way forward for my game. Originally, I had planned to develop Recollection as a collection of games, accessed in game via a browser interface and coupled only loosely by their atmospheric and thought provoking nature. I have changed my mind on this quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. And the trigger for this change is twofold. It was emerging from inside my own mind, and I also got quite a bit of feedback from several outside sources. The feedback I got was in general quite positive, but one request really stood out. That some element that connects the single parts of the collection, the single games, like an overarching story or a consistent gameplay mechanic or art style, would benefit the game greatly. And what can I say? I totally agree. I already felt this myself for quite some time, but I was always a bit afraid to go down that path as it would probably mean that the game would explode in scope. And I always kept telling myself, oh, it's sufficient in this loosely coupled state. But if I'm being honest with myself, it just isn't. There are other game collections out there on the market, like for example Edmund Macmillan's Basement Collection, Essays on Empathy by Deconstruct Team, or Retro Game Crunch. But these all have a certain aspect that connects the games to each other, be it a common aesthetic or a certain theme. Also, another very important reason for this change. I strongly felt like it would be incredibly difficult to get some proper marketing going for a game collection where every game looks and plays completely different and there's no overarching story. People would just have a hard time recognizing that these videos and screenshots belong to the same game. No memorability, which is kind of funny considering that the title of the game is Recollection. So I decided to try my best and go out on an epic quest to find a unique and beautiful art style that would work across all the games. A story that would connect them in a meaningful way, and maybe even a common gameplay mechanic. Or to put it in a different word, I was trying to find a vision for my game. And I started with the story. There are many ways in which stories can be told in games. But the first thing that came to my mind, considering Recollection, was a linear story, trying to fit the single games in a sequential order. So I tried that, and at first it seemed a bit magical because things started to come together much better than I had anticipated. I even made a little visual novel-like prototype in Unity using the Fungus plugin. It was supposed to be the story of a lifetime. A human being taking in an unknown substance which led to them transforming into animals under certain circumstances and experiencing horrible things like factory farming and wildfires. That human would then fall into a spiral of deep despair because of these incidents forced on them against their will. There would be a turning point, though, where the decision of the protagonist to continue instead of giving up entirely would lead to them first getting their personal lives back in order and then trying to make a positive impact on the world. It was a promising concept that I worked on for quite some time, but the week before Christmas I hit some really tough roadblocks. Some things just wouldn't ever fit together. Everything felt way too constructed and forced, and well, that's because it was exactly that. I was also afraid that if I didn't hit exactly the right tonality all the time, the wrong message could very easily be conceived, which was a big mental burden. And it was also a rather rigid story frame with not much space left to move parts around or change single games, which is a freedom I definitely wanted. So I got quite desperate and decided to start the holidays a few days early, hoping to return with newfound energy and inspiration at the start of 2022. That was probably not the best decision I ever made, to be honest. Worries kept haunting me a bit over the holidays, and thankfully I managed to keep them at a distance most of the time. But when the new year began and it was time to continue, I was hit with full force. I looked at what I had and only saw a pile of broken glass. I was really desperate, not much unlike the protagonist in my story. And I knew I had to make a decision somehow. At first, I talked to a couple of friends about the state I was in, and that already helped tremendously. Then I decided it was time to take a step back to square one, so to say, and consider my options. I made a list of these and of the criteria important to me, like emotional impact, ease of implementation and concept, replay value, and marketing potential. And I analyzed the options to those criteria. I could actually scrap the overarching story altogether, as every game tells its individual story, and maybe a consistent art style is already enough to ensure memorability. Or I could maybe go back to the linear story and try to make this one work somehow. Or I could make it a non-linear story, more of an open world type of thing, where the single games reside inside a bigger embracing game. Or I could make the hardest decision and cancel Recollection altogether and just go for a single game instead. I spent days considering these options, but didn't come to a conclusion. Everything had its pros and cons, and I had a strong feeling of decision paralysis. I went on YouTube to look for a solution, and I came upon the game development videos from Game Maker's Toolkit. He was in a similar situation to mine. We were both keeping us open to all directions and never really going deeper into one of them. This was quite helpful to see, but it wasn't quite enough, as unlike him, I had no strong pull into any one of these directions yet. I was just pulled into all directions all at once. In a situation like this, it's not very helpful to stay in front of the screen. My mind had to be freed somehow, and so I went for a really long walk. Of course, these thoughts accompanied me, but they suddenly were less heavy than before, and I got into a more easy and happy state of mind. And I was able to actually make a decision. I decided to go for the approach I like to call games within a game. And once I had made that decision, something just clicked. The whole vision for the game built itself up inside my mind and has only grown stronger ever since. Let me pitch it to you. So the short version of it, I wrote this down, so I'm just going to read it. Recollection is a surprising mix of roguelite 2.5D platforming action, atmospheric minigame experiences, and a mysterious backstory. Use your robot companion RC4D to analyze a haunted planet for the memories of its former inhabitants, and question your own beliefs along the way. So, long version now, gonna read this again. You are an entity on a spaceship around a planet. Your superiors have tasked you with analyzing this planet and finding out if it can be colonized or used otherwise. To do this, you send down your trusty robot companion RC4D, but soon find out that the planet is haunted by the phantoms of its former inhabitants. You move and fight your way through several areas, like a forest and an abandoned city, scanning special places, items, and the memories of the phantoms for information. Returning to your spaceship, you can trade this info for upgrades of your robot. You also find bigger chunks of info from level bosses that allow you a rather specific, aka playable, look into the memory of one of the planet's former inhabitants. These episodes range from devastating topics like factory farming to more optimistic ones like rediscovering the beauty of everyday things. You slowly begin to figure out the bigger picture of this planet's demise and start to question whether the plan of your superiors is actually the right thing to do. So we got a rather ambitious mix of genres here. If I had to compare it to some reference games, I'd say that the planet and upgrade part is inspired mostly by Rogue Legacy. The mini-games, aka memories, aka the games that were once the core of the collection, are mostly inspired by What Remains of Edith Finch. And the mysterious, overarching story is inspired by Daniel Mullin's games like Inscription and The Hex. So yeah, I know this goes quite a bit against what I said in my first devlog. The scope is now much bigger than previously planned, and I want to make a whole action game as an embracing game, a genre that I'm not terribly experienced in. But it just feels so much like the right way to go. For the first time, I have a strong vision of what the game will play and look like. And in this vision, it's a game that's varied, interesting, moving and fun to play. And most of all, in this vision, it's gonna be one recognizable game that belongs together. Still, I absolutely can't be sure yet if this is all gonna work out like I imagine. That's why my next step is to build a prototype of the core gameplay loop, to actually validate if this whole thing comes together in a satisfying way, and to see if I can possibly manage the much bigger scope of the project. My next devlogs will probably be all about the progress on this. So to sum it up a bit, making decisions is hard, especially very foundational decisions. But choosing one of the many options available to me has not narrowed me down at all. Instead, it has led to a whole new world of possibilities and ideas, and has led to a strong vision for the game. I know there will be many other hard decisions on the road ahead, but I feel a bit better prepared for them now. Taking a step back, viewing things from a distance or a different angle, analyzing a problem for multiple possible solutions. These steps are always a good idea, I believe, and are the foundation for a confident decision. But the crucial step is to actually make the decision and go for it. Actually going down a path instead of moving in circles like I have for quite some time. It could turn out to be a bad decision later down the road, but you will never find out if you don't try. Yeah, and the little bonus tip here is always going for a walk when trying to make a tough decision. It's become sort of a magical thing for me. So how about you? How do you go on about making tough decisions? Do you also have some magical tool in your belt, like going for a walk? Let me know down in the comments. Maybe you want to share with us one tough decision you had to make in the past or are struggling with today. Just make sure to double check if you're really comfortable with sharing it. So that's all for today's devlog. I'm quite excited to see where this whole thing goes, and I hope you're along for the ride. Have a great day and see you in the next one. Bye!